Hello, I'm Dr. Alan Wolfelt. I'm honored to serve as the director of the Center for Loss and Life Transition, located in the foothills of Fort Collins, Colorado. In recent days, I've been asked to do some writing and some teaching about some of the challenges that we face with the coronavirus. And I put together a little piece that relates to 6 essential needs that we have to be aware of that can be of help to us. And I'm honored to be able to share that with you. I invite you to take what you want, leave what you don't, but thank you for listening in. Alongside, of course, the physical pandemic, this novel coronavirus is causing a pandemic of grief. That's what, in part, we're all feeling right now. It's grief. And I think it's helpful to recognize that. Grief, as you may well know, is everything we think and feel on the inside whenever our attachments are threatened, we're harmed or severed in some way. We experience things ranging from potential shock and disbelief. We're anxious, which is a form, of course, of fear. We become sad, naturally, possibly feeling alone and isolated. We might protest or get angry. That's pretty instinctive. Protest is about wanting things back the way they used to be. So don't shame yourself if right now you find yourself on edge or protesty or angry. We might feel regretful. Those are all human emotions that come with grief. The sum total of these and other thoughts and feelings, way beyond what I just in part mentioned, are feelings of grief that are secondary to the coronavirus pandemic. Well, no wonder. The virus is threatening every single person on Earth with a myriad of losses of every kind, from separation from loved ones to financial endangerment to canceled once-in-a-lifetime events and many, many more. Name something, think about something right now that you care about or that gives your life meaning, and in all likelihood, you'll find that this attachment is now negatively affected or threatened in some way by this virus. And then, of course, there's worry. What will happen next? Will we get sick? Will someone we care deeply about get sick? Will a friend get sick? Will people we love die? Our anxiety about all these future unknowns is also a part of our natural grief. In fact, it's called anticipatory grief, in part because our minds and our hearts are naturally trying to anticipate and to prepare for what is to come. So we're grieving. Grief is normal, it's necessary because it's part of our love, and I'm sure you agree that love is our most precious asset. Our capacity to love requires the necessity to acknowledge grief and, when appropriate, to mourn. But it's also essential to recognize that we can and should work with our grief. While it lives inside of us, it's passive, it's inert. But when we find ways to express it outside of ourselves, it changes. It becomes active. It helps us feel better. And it helps us survive and actually be able to enrich our human experience. This process of expressing grief is called mourning. While each of us grieves and mourns in unique ways, we can share 6 basic mourning needs. So let's focus for a moment on understanding those needs and seeing if they can be helpful to us as we're confronted with the pandemic of grief. Reminding you again, grief, it's our internal response to loss. Mourning is the shared social response, or grief gone public. So let's take a look at the 6 needs. First need is, of course, to acknowledge the reality of the pandemic as well as our grief. So first, please ensure that you're accurately informed about this virus, COVID-19, and measures that you should and can be taking to keep yourself and others as safe as possible. There's a lot of misinformation out there right now, so please limit your news to factual sources. And second, acknowledge the reality that your grief about this pandemic is authentic, is real. As I said, everything you care about may be under threat right now. Grief is your normal and natural response to that threat. You can turn this static grief into active mourning by regularly talking to others about your internal thoughts and feelings, sharing any fears that you have. We all know that a basic premise is if you have a fear and you don't acknowledge it, it just becomes larger. So it's normal right now to have anxiety, to feel depressed, but don't try to keep that to yourself. Remember that difference between grief and mourning, and acknowledging that reality means taking the grief from the inside to the outside. The more you communicate openly and honestly, the better you'll feel, and the people around you will also sense that from you as well. Need number 2, honor all of your feelings. Again, it's common to experience a wide range of emotions about this unprecedented global threat. I mentioned a number of them just a few minutes ago: shock, disbelief, potential protest emotions, sadness, anxiety, loneliness. The list goes on. Whatever you're feeling, know that it's normal. It's grief. I understand that most of these feelings are not pleasant. They're naturally uncomfortable. But if you spend time each day being aware of them and naming them and expressing them outside of yourself, you'll find that they will more naturally soften. If you don't, we know that they generally hardened. Characteristics of our grief and mourning only soften if we express them. So don't over-isolate and keep that to yourself in a way that leads you to feel more anxious and or depressed, if you will. So talk about them with others, or write about them in a journal or tools like social media, whatever works for you and is a natural fit for your personality. You'll find that fully and honestly expressing all of your feelings will provide you with some comfort and some sense actually of relief. A third need: practice gratitude for all the good in your life. And here's a warning: those first 2 I just talked about, those are important. Some people who've contacted me at our center have wanted to skip those and go right to, let's just be happy despite the fact that these are challenging times. And I just want to warn you, just based on some of those recent calls, to try to create awareness that it's okay you're in grief. Don't deny that. Then it becomes your enemy instead of your friend. So number 3, practice gratitude for the good that is in your life. Now is an essential time to be mindful of the good that is in fact in our lives. Spend at least a few minutes each day calling to mind people, experiences, things that have been and are very precious to you. Then find ways to express those memories and those awarenesses with people around you that you have access to. For example, while you're at home sheltering in place, you might write one personalized thank you note each day to someone who's meant a lot to you, expressing your gratitude. Tell them about moments and memories that have been particularly meaningful to you in your life with them. Start a gratitude journal. It's another option. Having gratitude for what was and what is will help you foster hope that will be hope. I remind you, is an expectation of a good that is yet to be. Embrace that. Need 4, be kind to yourself. Treat yourself with patience and with compassion. Your pandemic grief needs and deserves tender, loving care. Every morning, make a commitment to take care of yourself physically, cognitively, emotionally, socially, spiritually. Those are the 5 areas that we're affected by when grief enters our life. What are they again? We're going to be affected physically. We'll probably be affected cognitively, where it's harder to focus. We're affected certainly emotionally. It's like being on a roller coaster for many people right now. We're certainly affected socially by the distancing that's had to occur. And grief is inherently spiritual, so it raises those kinds of questions that are appropriate that you might well be asking. You might be saying, why? Why us? Why now? Why this way? But those 5 areas are critically important to tend to. So for example, find at least some small way each day to do things that nurture you. Maybe it's a 10-minute walk outside. Maybe it's like what my wife's been doing, is puzzle after puzzle on the table that I then have to take a photo of for her to secure the future memory that she's been spending hours putting together these lovely jigsaw puzzles. Find something that works for you. Maybe it's a short FaceTime visit with a friend or a board game. Maybe it's a 5-minute prayer or meditation session. All 5 of those aspects I mentioned, physical, cognitive, emotional, social, and spiritual, they're things we need to give attention to. If you neglect one or more of them, you find yourself getting out of balance and your pandemic grief and health being at risk for being worse. And number 5, search for meaning. Loss and grief always cause us to naturally search for meaning. It's quite common to wonder why all this is happening. We're in we are in fact in what's called liminal space, which means betwixt and between. To me, there's no better definition right now than that we as a society are in a state of liminal space, which literally again means you're betwixt and between. We're suspended between a past for which we long and a future for which we hope. We're kind of in a pause-like phase. There was our life before the pandemic, and in the future there'll be our life after the pandemic. But right now there's this period of unknown and transition and suspension. We're betwixt and between again. It's uncomfortable. Yet it's often this enforced discomfort that ultimately transforms us. It's not that we're masochistic and enjoying it, but we do need to consciously say, even in the face of being in liminal space, what am I going to take away from this experience? What am I going to learn? What priorities might I end up changing in my life based on this new reality? To meet this morning need, try to work on mindfulness. Be present in this day and in this moment. Devote some time every day to your spirit or your life force. Call it what you like, your divine spark. You know, we all have a divine spark, that which gives your life meaning and purpose. And right now that's threatened. It's muted, if you will. But we'll come out of this darkness. We'll come to light, and you'll relight that divine spark. What helps you now, though, feel some joy, even in the face of these limitations? What gives you meaning? What gives you purpose? What do you have appreciation for? And need number 6, reach out to others to give and accept support. Even during periods of isolation, we as humans need personal contact. Many people have discovered that in these recent days, that they didn't realize how much they may have taken for granted the contact they had with friends and family. Well, when we're grieving, we need emotional support. So I encourage you to use this time to build relationships, even in face of limitations. Talk openly and honestly with people in your home. Be as kind and empathetic, as caring as you can possibly be. Talk openly and honestly, again, about what you're experiencing. To communicate with others, video calls are probably in some ways we find the best substitution for face-to-face conversation. You'll still feel a sense of connection, if you will. Voice calls might come second, and after that, of course, emails, texting, social media, ways that are comfortable for you to try to reach out and connect with your family and friends. Don't forget the power of even the handwritten letter right now. There's a lot of wisdom anchored in our going backward instead of pushing forward to new technologies all the time. So sit down and write a letter in maybe ways that you haven't been for some time. The point is to stay connected as much as possible, to be open and honest in those communications with what you're feeling. Your candor is going to encourage others to do the same, to be honest and create opportunities for natural support, ongoing support, kindness. This pandemic will no doubt change our world and change each of us individually. The good news is that if we work on these 6 needs that I've attempted to kind of outline for you in the coming days and weeks ahead, we can emerge from this liminal space as changed people. Transformation actually means an entire change in form. And as you reflect, you'll find that, in fact, you're changed by this experience. Your grief work will cause you to evolve in ways that will make the rest of your life, in some ways, even more meaning-filled. Through mourning, you have the opportunity to get to know yourself better. You might have the time to develop better self-care habits. You have the chance to solidify and work on improving relationships, or maybe reconnecting with some people that you've wanted to for some time but not had the opportunity to do so. And you may be able to gain more clarity about what really matters in your life, to let go of some of the things that maybe really don't. Grief is always a transformative experience, but this global grief, I hope and pray, will unify us like nothing ever before. Now, I don't mean that masochistically. We'll be glad when this is over. We're not enjoying this at all. It's natural, again, to want to protest it, to want things back the way they used to be. But I ask you to imagine what we can do together if each of us use this liminal time in our lives to improve our self-awareness, our mindfulness, to work on building relationships, to soften fear, to take care of ourselves, and very importantly, of each other. I have great hope for our shared future, and I hope you share that with me. Please join me in mourning well so we can all go on to live well and to love well. Because in fact, when we have grief enter our lives and we convert that into mourning and we dose these 6 needs that I've attempted to articulate, we can and we will go on to live well and to love well. Thank you so much for allowing me to take a few minutes of your time to share these needs with you and invite you to consider them. Again, take what you want, leave what you don't. Thank you so much.